I'll never forget the day I first heard about the slapped ham. It was a typical Wednesday morning when my coworker, Rachel, burst into the office, visibly shaken. She collapsed onto her desk chair, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. "You won't believe what happened to me last night," she whispered urgently. I had no idea what she was talking about, but something in her tone made me lean in closer. She recounted how her neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, had come knocking on her door around 10 p.m. He seemed agitated and insisted that he needed to speak with her about the ham. Rachel thought it was some kind of prank, but there was something unsettling about his demeanor. She reluctantly let him in, and that's when she saw it. A glazed ham sitting on the kitchen table, perfectly sliced and arranged, as if waiting for its victim. "He slapped me," Rachel continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm talking about the ham, not Mr. Jenkins." At first, I thought she was joking, but her expression told a different story. It was then that I noticed something peculiar. The ham seemed to be staring at me, its glaze reflecting the faint light from the kitchen like an unblinking eye. I tried to brush it off as mere paranoia, but the image of that ham stayed with me long after Rachel left the office. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a descent into madness that would shake the very foundations of my reality. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about the slapped ham incident. I started digging into Mr. Jenkins and his neighbors, hoping to find some connection or explanation for what had happened to Rachel. The more I researched, the more I became convinced that this was more than just a prank gone wrong. I spent countless hours scouring the internet, searching for any mention of slapped ham or similar incidents. Most hits were from urban legends websites and social media forums, where people shared their own bizarre stories of being slapped by mysterious objects. Some claimed it was a curse, while others attributed it to alien invasions or supernatural entities. I dismissed most of these claims as mere fantasy, but the more I read, the more I began to feel like I was onto something. The common thread among all these incidents was the presence of glazed ham at the center of each story. It was always a glazed ham, never anything else. A simple fact that seemed too coincidental to ignore. I started wondering if Mr. Jenkins had stumbled upon some kind of dark ritual or ancient practice that involved using glaze-coated meat as a tool for whatever it was he'd done to Rachel. The more I learned, the more I felt like I was being pulled into something sinister. My research led me to an obscure book on local folklore, which mentioned a long-forgotten tradition of ham whispering. According to the text, this ancient practice involved using glaze-coated meat to summon and control supernatural entities. The words echoed in my mind as I delved deeper into the world of the slapped ham. As I delved deeper into the world of ham whispering, I stumbled upon a series of disturbing images and videos that made my skin crawl. It seemed that Mr. Jenkins was not an isolated incident, but rather part of a larger pattern of behavior. The images were taken from old forums and social media platforms, where people shared their own experiences with being slapped by mysterious objects. At first, I thought it was just a bunch of pranksters having fun, but as I scrolled through the posts, I noticed something unsettling. Each image featured a glaze-coated ham at its center. The videos were even more disturbing. They showed people being slapped by what appeared to be solid objects, with no visible explanation for how they'd come into contact with these things. Some of the victims claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the background, while others spoke of an intense feeling of dread that followed each slap. I tried to brush it off as mere hysteria, but the more I saw, the more I became convinced that something was seriously wrong. The images and videos seemed to be seeping into my dreams, haunting me with visions of glaze-coated hams and flailing limbs. One image in particular caught my eye, a grainy photograph of Mr. Jenkins standing next to a kitchen counter, with the same glazed ham sitting on the table. But what really caught my attention was the figure looming behind him, a shadowy figure with glowing eyes that seemed to be staring directly at me. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this image might be more than just a random photograph. It might be proof that Mr. Jenkins had indeed stumbled upon something sinister, and that the slapped ham was just the tip of the iceberg. As I continued to dig deeper, I stumbled upon a cryptic symbol that seemed to be connected to the slapped ham incidents. It was an intricate pattern of lines and shapes, etched into the margins of an old book on ham whispering. The symbol seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if it was alive and watching me. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that this might be the key to understanding the true nature of the slapped ham. According to the book, this symbol was used in ancient rituals to summon and control supernatural entities. The author claimed that these entities were known as the Devourers, beings of pure malevolence that fed on human fear and terror. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Mr. Jenkins had stumbled upon one of these rituals, and that's why he'd been slapped by the ham. The more I read, the more I became convinced that this symbol was connected to an ancient cult that worshipped the Devourers. The cult, known as the Order of the Glaze, was said to have been eradicated centuries ago, but their rituals and symbols continued to manifest in modern times. I felt like I was uncovering a dark conspiracy, one that threatened to consume me whole. As I delved deeper into the world of the Order of the Glaze, I began to notice strange markings on my own kitchen utensils. They were tiny, almost imperceptible, but they seemed to match the symbol from the book. It was as if I'd been subtly initiated into their twisted world. I knew then that I had to be careful, that every move I made could potentially trigger a response from the Devourers. But it was too late for that now. I had seen too much, and my curiosity had gotten the better of me. As I continued to research the Order of the Glaze, I started to experience strange occurrences that made me question my own sanity. It began with small things, finding kitchen utensils in odd places, hearing faint whispers in the dead of night, and seeing shadowy figures lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. At first, I wrote it off as mere paranoia, but as the events escalated, I realized that something was very wrong. One night, I woke up to find a figure standing over me, its face twisted into a grotesque grin. The figure was surrounded by an aura of darkness, and its presence seemed to fill the room with an unspeakable malevolence. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The figure didn't move or speak. It just stood there, watching me with an unblinking gaze. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. I was left lying there, gasping for breath, wondering if it had all been just a product of my fevered imagination. But the encounter left me shaken, and I knew that I had to be more careful. I started to vary my routine, changing my daily habits in an attempt to avoid whatever malevolent force was lurking in the shadows. But no matter what I did, the feeling of being watched never went away. It was always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to pounce. And then, one day, I received a package with no return address. Inside, I found a small, glazed ham, sitting on a bed of black velvet. The ham was perfectly preserved, with no signs of spoilage or decay. But it was what was written on the card that made my blood run cold. I stared at the card in my hand, my mind reeling with a mix of fear and confusion. The message was simple: "You're next." I knew then that I had to take action, to expose the truth behind the Order of the Glaze and their sinister rituals. But as I delved deeper into the world of the cult, I realized that nothing was as it seemed. Every person I trusted turned out to be a member, or at least, they were in league with them. Even my own sister, who had always been my rock, was revealed to be a high-ranking member of the Order. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, my world crumbling around me. But I refused to give up. I knew that I had to keep digging, to uncover the truth no matter the cost. And so, I continued my investigation, following a trail of clues that led me deeper into the heart of darkness. It was then that I stumbled upon an ancient text, hidden away in a dusty corner of a forgotten library. The book was bound in black leather, adorned with symbols of the Order's twisted rituals. As I flipped through its pages, I realized that this was the key to understanding the true nature of the Devourers. But as I read on, I began to feel a creeping sense of dread. The more I learned, the more I realized that I was in grave danger. The cult would stop at nothing to silence me, and I knew that I had to be careful. I started to vary my routine even further, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it wasn't just the physical danger that kept me up at night. It was the knowledge of what I'd been a part of, unwittingly or not. The cult's influence had seeped into every aspect of my life, and I knew that I couldn't escape its grasp forever. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I found myself losing grip on reality. The cult's influence had taken hold of my mind, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every rustle of leaves outside my window sent shivers down my spine. I became paranoid, convinced that the cult was closing in on me. I started to see things that weren't there. Shadowy figures lurking in the corners of my room, ghostly apparitions floating just beyond the edge of perception. My friends and family grew concerned, but I couldn't explain what was happening. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of madness, with no lifeline in sight. The cult's symbols and rituals became etched into my mind, haunting me every waking moment. I started to see them everywhere, on the walls, on the furniture, even in my own reflection. I knew then that I had to get out to escape the grip of the cult before it was too late. But where could I go? The world outside seemed just as dark and twisted as the one I'd been trapped in. I felt like a rat in a maze with no way out. And then, one day, I stumbled upon an ancient text that made my blood run cold. It was the ritual of the Devourers, the very thing I had been trying to escape. I knew then that I had hit rock bottom, that there was no going back. The cult's hold on me was absolute, and I was ready to surrender to its madness. As I delved deeper into the world of the cult, I realized that nothing was as it seemed. Every person I trusted turned out to be a member, or at least, they were in league with them. Even my own sister, who had always been my rock, was revealed to be a high-ranking member of the Order. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, my world crumbling around me. But I refused to give up. I knew that I had to keep digging, to uncover the truth no matter the cost. And so, I continued my investigation, following a trail of clues that led me deeper into the heart of darkness. It was then that I stumbled upon an ancient text, hidden away in a dusty corner of a forgotten library. The book was bound in black leather, adorned with symbols of the Order's twisted rituals. As I flipped through its pages, I realized that this was the key to understanding the true nature of the Devourers. But as I read on, I began to feel a creeping sense of dread. The more I learned, the more I realized that I was in grave danger. The cult would stop at nothing to silence me, and I knew that I had to be careful. I started to vary my routine even further, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it wasn't just the physical danger that kept me up at night. It was the knowledge of what I'd been a part of, unwittingly or not. The cult's influence had seeped into every aspect of my life, and I knew that I couldn't escape its grasp forever. As I delved deeper into the world of the cult, I knew that I had to confront the entity head-on. The Devourer was a being of pure malevolence, a creature that fed on fear and suffering. It was said that once you faced it, there was no turning back. I steeled myself for the encounter, knowing that it would be my last stand against the cult. I gathered what little information I had, poring over ancient texts and seeking out whispers of knowledge from those who had dared to oppose the order. Finally, the day arrived. I stood before the entrance to the cult's inner sanctum, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the weight of expectation. I took a deep breath and stepped forward into the abyss. The room was dimly lit, the only sound the soft rustling of pages as an ancient tome lay open on a pedestal before me. The words danced across the page, their meaning shifting and flowing like a living thing. And then I saw it. The Devourer. It was a presence, a feeling that settled over me like a shroud. A cold, calculating gaze that seemed to pierce my very soul. I felt myself shrinking back, retreating from the horror that faced me. But something within me refused to give in. I stood tall, my voice shaking but steady as I spoke the words of defiance. As I stood before the Devourer, the world around me began to warp and distort. The air seemed to ripple and bend, like the surface of a pond struck by a stone. Colors blended together in a maddening swirl, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling before my eyes. I felt myself being pulled apart, stretched out on a cosmic scale, as if my molecular structure was being torn asunder. I tried to step back, but there was no escape. The Devourer's presence seemed to be drawing me in, sucking me into a vortex of madness and despair. I was consumed by visions of the past and future, all swirling together in a maddening dance. Memories long buried rose to the surface, like bubbles rising from a depths of collective unconsciousness. I saw my childhood home, reduced to ashes and ruin. I saw the faces of those I had loved and lost, their eyes black as coal, their skin gray as stone. I saw the world burning around me, the very foundations of reality crumbling into dust. And through it all, the Devourer watched, its presence a cold, calculating comfort in the midst of chaos. I was trapped in a maelstrom of madness, unable to escape the vortex that held me fast. My mind reeled from the sheer weight of what I saw, my sanity fraying at the edges like a thread pulled too tight. And still the Devourer waited, its presence a steady heartbeat in the darkness, reminding me that I was not alone in this abyss of despair. As I emerged from the depths of madness, I knew that it was time to face the Devourer once more. The cult had finally given me the information I needed, and I was ready to put an end to their twisted rituals. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest, as the Devourer rose up before me. Its presence was like a cold wind, sending shivers down my spine. But I stood tall, my determination burning brighter than ever. I knew that this would be the final confrontation, and I was ready to emerge victorious. I raised my hands, and a blast of energy shot forth, striking the Devourer with incredible force. It stumbled back, its presence wavering for a moment as if it had been caught off guard. I took advantage of the opening, charging forward with all my might. I struck at the Devourer with every ounce of strength I possessed, but it was like hitting a stone wall. Its form seemed to shift and flow around me like liquid metal, making it impossible to land a solid blow. I knew that I had to think fast, or risk being consumed by the entity's power. That's when I remembered the words of an ancient text, spoken by a long-dead cult leader who had dared to oppose the order. I spoke the words aloud, feeling the power of the ritual course through my veins. The devourer let out a deafening screech as it stumbled backwards, its form beginning to unravel like a thread pulled from a sweater. I took advantage of the distraction, striking again and again until finally, with one final blow, the devourer collapsed to the ground, defeated. I stood over its lifeless form, my chest heaving with exhaustion. I had done it. I had faced my fears and emerged victorious. But as I turned to walk away, I heard a faint whisper in my ear. "You may have won this battle," it said, "but the war is far from over." As I walked away from the devourer's lifeless form, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had simply traded one enemy for another. The whisper in my ear still echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder that the cult's influence was far more widespread than I had ever imagined. I made my way back to the surface world, determined to expose the truth about the Order and its sinister plans. But as I emerged into the bright sunlight, I felt a sense of unease wash over me. Everything seemed different now, like I had been forever changed by my experiences in the abyss. The world around me seemed to be twisted and distorted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. I looked down at my hands, feeling a sense of detachment from them as if they were no longer mine. My mind was a jumble of emotions and memories, all swirling together in a mad dance. I knew that I would never be the same again, that some part of me had been left behind in the depths of the abyss. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head, but the world around me seemed to be spinning out of control. I stumbled forward, blindly searching for a way to make sense of it all. I eventually found myself standing in front of a mirror, staring at the reflection that stared back at me. The eyes that looked up at me were different, haunted by the memories of what I had seen and experienced. But they were also stronger, more resilient than before. I smiled wryly to myself, knowing that I would never be the same again. Some part of me would always remain in the abyss, forever changed by the horrors that I had faced. But another part of me was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge and experience that I had gained. I took one final look at my reflection, then turned away from the mirror. The world outside was full of uncertainty and danger, but I was ready for it. I knew that I would always carry the scars of my experiences with me, but I also knew that I would emerge stronger and more resilient as a result.